Hey everybody, Casey here with Chief Entertainment Podcast. I hope you guys are enjoying the fall season. It's definitely kicked up here. We have winds that are basically tearing everything apart. But I'm back on today. I know it's taken about 2 weeks since I've shot anything out for you guys, so I appreciate you being patient. Again, if there's anything that you guys resonate with or even learn, please make sure you guys subscribe, like, and comment on our episode. Today, we have a special guest for you guys, and I'm super honored to have him on. I had the pleasure of meeting him at Hall of Flowers, and since then just kind of been diving deep into his mission and thought I would share him with you guys. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Things to talk about. Obviously, I got to meet you in a cannabis event, Hall of Flowers. If some of you guys are not familiar, I'll make sure I'll put the link in the description about what it's about. But that was a great event. We also had the chance to learn a little bit about what you do, where you're from, what you built. But today, I kind of want to dive into who you are, what you're doing, and talk a little bit about politics. And I know that's new for everybody here, but let's do this. Let's have you kind of give an introduction of who you are.
Certainly.
And we'll dive into what you built from there.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised here in Sonoma County, so grew up kind of understanding the way that cannabis fit into this world, but I wanted to expand further, and so I basically went on to the military so that I could get a little bit of education and instruction, and served there on active duty. I was there for 4 years, and then came back here to the junior college in Santa Rosa. Because I realized that I wanted to expand my knowledge. And as my time in the military went on, I realized that there's a lot more out there in the world that I needed to understand. And being a high school dropout, I realized that there were different ways of learning, and sometimes you just need to have access to that different path to succeed and excel. So I eventually found out that I absolutely loved education, and went on to get my undergraduate degree. I was very lucky to be involved in a lot of amazing programs through the military, fellowships that helped me understand international relations, study international policy. And then I came back home at the request of my mentor, who then basically showed me the ropes of how to do business, how to be a political consultant, how to be a business consultant. And so I have spent, in one form or another, basically the last 20 years analyzing policy, kind of understanding the macro systems that really shape a lot of what we do in our world, whether it be the political realm, the economic realm, all of the things that I think are major systems that define our lives and that we in general accept and operate within. And so once I kind of got that information, or that insight from a mentor, I then went out on my own. I started some other companies, which we can get into, but then eventually, through my experience as a small business owner, realized that California has a very adversarial relationship with small businesses and business in general. And so that, I think, was kind of the intro for me in, if you will say, the political realm, and just kind of going through the process of learning who I am and what it is that I can offer the world.
Wow, that's a lot more than I read so far. It was quite a background story, and it's pretty inspirational to know. You came from your big college, and you not really a politician background is what I'm seeing here, and kind of somebody that we can relate to and probably have been in some of our shoes. And I think that's what a lot of us are noticing, that we need more of if we are going to be voting for people to be speaking for us on as far as for the people.
Very much so.
And thank you for your service. I know you briefly touched on that. How long were you in the Army, Marines?
So I have an unusual background, but I did 4 years of active duty in the Navy, and then went into the Marine Corps. I was enlisted. So I'm what's called a Mustang, which is somebody who's both served as a enlisted man and also as an officer. So I first started, as an E nothing, and worked my way up. Eventually made it to E5. and then got my commission and became an infantry officer. So I started as an E1 and then got out as a captain. And it was a great opportunity, a great experience. And so all told, I did about 16 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. Amazing. Thank you for your service. So, being that you're from Sonoma County or you're a Sonoma County resident, we do want to touch on here, and we will make sure that all of the links are in our description for this particular episode. As far as, sending Chris to Congress, to me, that's a whole new topic. I've never really gotten an opportunity to meet with anybody at that level that is going to take on that task. And, looking at your website, I know that you guys are focusing on, environment, the economy, and education. And as a mom, those are all the things that I think is really important that we talk on. I've never been the type to say I'm into politics, but it wasn't until I became a mom and being in the cannabis industry that I felt that we had a voice for a reason. And so tell me a little bit about your cannabis background and maybe some of your experience there.
Certainly. Well, as I mentioned, I grew up in Sonoma County, so I think there's a particular experience that goes along with that, being a teenager in Sonoma County, particularly in the 90s. And so it was always around. I don't really think that many people cared. It was more of a lifestyle. It was more of a call-in at that point. And from there, I didn't really take much of it seriously. It just was a lot of what my friends did. And then I thought that was, a good expression. Obviously, in the military, I stepped away from all of it. And I didn't really think much of it until I came home at 35, 36. And that was approximately 2016, right as the Prop 64 was coming through. And so what I saw was great opportunity for a brand new industry, and felt that because it was a blank slate, that there was a great opportunity there for those, particularly those in the small business roles, to have a bigger say in how it was that cannabis kind of came to market in a way, metaphorically speaking. And so I just I started to get involved, and eventually we got a licensed distribution company, and that was located here in Sonoma County. We focused heavily on representing farmers, predominantly from the Emerald Triangle, including Sonoma County. And our goal was to effectively make sure that small farmers of Northern California had representation across the entire state. And our mission was to do it efficiently, effectively, and lawfully. And so we focused very heavily on doing that. And what we ran into was the reality that most licensed cannabis operators are running into. And we started to see that. And so this is just one more piece of what I look at as business experience that I can bring to the table, knowing that I've stood there and tried to negotiate and maneuver through all of the laws and all the ordinances and all the regulations and make a business happen out of it. And that obviously that experience was an impactful one for me, because it was really the demonstration to me that California is trying to destroy small business, cannabis included. And I think to put a point on that, one of the things that I would love to see is that cannabis be recognized as a regular business, and I would like to see cannabis regard itself as a regular business, because what's happening is there's an attack on the cannabis industry, but there's also an attack on small business, and it's done like this on purpose. It's a split, because they're attacking cannabis, and cannabis is thinking that cannabis is by itself. Separately over here, they're attacking small business, and there's nobody else to help small business. If we combine our efforts together and help protect small business across the board, I feel like there's a great opportunity there that we need to capitalize on.
Yeah, well said. I mean, you said it. I mean, California itself is it's its own little cup of tea when it comes to who we got to deal with as far as our governor, what they're, all the policies that they're putting out there. Some of the regulations, I think, just don't make sense. And I know we had talked about this offline. You have a big space in your heart for farmers. And I know a lot of the policies that they're putting out there, they're affected by this. I want to say Newsom recently just killed the farmers bill. I think that's correct. um, which means they don't have the opportunity to be seen like any other, let's say, agriculture farm or a farm that's selling oranges and tomatoes. So for me, I'm not a business owner yet, but I do see a lot of people talking about this that are owning businesses, how they're affected by it because they're either having to let go of employees because they're unable to pay them, or even the cost of operating a business is impossible. So then you add all of those factors to a cannabis business who is overregulated, already paying extra taxes on top of the taxes that's already applied here in California. When did you? Well, I'm pretty sure you've noticed it as a business owner yourself, but also being in the cannabis space, is that the same thing that you're hearing from the people in Mendo, in Sonoma? I mean, I know we have some great endorsements coming out of that area, but there's more than just that small area in Sonoma. There's the Emerald Triangle is out there at the heart of the cannabis industry.
Very much so, yes. And I'll say, I got out of the military and began working as as a business consultant. And I started to have inclinations or an inkling that there was something awry with the way that California did business. And you have to remember, I'm coming out of the military in 2016 and working specifically on just regular business, studying their ordinances, their laws, and so on. And then eventually we pivoted over to cannabis. And I began to see that there were some similarities between what was created as what I call frictions to commerce for regular businesses that I also saw in 64. And the way that 64 is designed is that it creates so many basically friction points that for you to be profitable, you have to be a massive, massive operation. And what they've done is they've designed basically the process to be so just onerous that your costs as an operator, and I can speak specifically as a distributor, but your operational costs just to meet your compliance requirements creates a scenario where you are no longer you're no longer profitable. And so California has really gone after that profit margin that exists for most. And after cannabis, what I started to do was focus on the food supply chain, because that's a huge, huge concern for me. I'd love to talk through more on food and water as we go into this, but what I'm watching in the food supply chain now is that they're pulling basically clauses out of other documents, other pieces of legislation, and they're adding those into the food supply chain requirements. And so what it's doing is it's creating more and more barriers, more and more obstacles for your small business owners to overcome. And so I believe that cannabis was a test case as far as regulations go, to see how far the state could push business owners while business owners still accept that this is a viable market. Because most of us that are on the ground and listening to what's happening in the industry know that this is not a viable market. Everybody is just trying to figure out how to solve it. But right now, the regulations are purposely destroying the cannabis farmers, and there's nobody representing. Part of the reason is because there's no one representing cannabis, whether it's at the state level or the federal level. But no one person is really the champion. We've had a lot of people in state legislature who have been very helpful. There's about 5 or 6 of them that really were very helpful in 2017, 18, and 19. But I mean, nobody is really the California champion of cannabis on a policy front.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing at the federal level. There's nobody leading the charge.
Yeah, and I feel like somebody from California with a background in it is probably it has to be somebody like that with enough
Yeah.
background and knowledge and experience, and living in a county, living through it make a hell of a difference as far as you really fighting for it and making sure that it makes sense for everybody at the end of the day. I know it's not a tough job that you're doing taking this on. And I know that you lightly talked about the food supply also being kind of, intertwined into that. There's several different topics that we're going to dive into. And, again, if you guys learn something new, one or two things, please make sure you subscribe so I can continue to bring on guests like Chris, because I think, we're all here to learn and be better and figure out how we can survive this, because there's many people right now, including myself, who's trying to wrap my head around the groceries, the gas. I have two young kids. They're not in school by choice. So we can touch on education, because I know that's something that you're big on. There's just so many real, big things that are going on that I would hate for somebody, whether they're in in the cannabis industry or not, to just not vote or sit this one out, because this one it feels like we have to speak. We have to be aware of what's going on, because like you said, our food, our water, our children are being affected by this in the long run.
I would say they're under attack.
And so, yeah, let's talk about them taking away my meat. No, I'm a kid. I'm a parent of a child who has autism, nonverbal. He's high functioning. He's amazing. He's a bright boy. He's loving. But there's some battles and challenges that we have to, go through. And a lot of it, from what I'm understanding and all the rabbit holes that I've gone through, it comes from a lot of the food and the metals that are in our water, and the things that they're spraying on our crops. And they may sell that as organic because they can pass that. Let's touch on that. I don't know how much you know about that, but I'm pretty sure we can, lightly talk about the water. When I'm driving up there and I go to the events up there, I see so many different signs to Gavin Newsom specifically to leave the water alone, their water. Let's touch on that. How is that affecting our farmers, maybe even our agriculture farmers?
Well, every business relies on inputs, everybody. And as a farmer, you basically sit inside of the environment and make sure that you have enough inputs to cover your outputs. That's basic business. And one of the maneuvers that we are watching happen, and some of it I think is through incompetence, and others I believe it's malice. But whether it be at the state level or even at the federal level, what we're watching is basically an assault on natural resources and the ability of not only the public but the private, commercial entities to access that in a reasonable way, or even worse, making sure by doing the same exact things that my opponent is doing, by removing our ability to store these natural resources. So, for example, we have here in the North Coast, we have Lake Pillsbury, which is a 26 billion gallon lake that supplies water to roughly 600,000 people. So if you can imagine, effectively, Ukiah South, all the way down to Marin County, is all supplied by water from this one lake. And as you well know, there's a great deal of agriculture in this region also. So we have no shortage of vineyards, lots of dairy, cattle, you name it. We are very prominently ag focused from, say, Sonoma County North. One of the things that's happening is we have a co-opted government that is taking away our ability to determine our future by reducing or removing our access to natural resources. And this is why we lose up to 20,000 ranchers a year in the United States, because they don't have the ability to make a profit, because whatever resource, whatever inputs that they need to survive have become so expensive that it's no longer profitable. And this right now is not changing. We don't have anything that's really going to kind of tip the needle where we are in the survivable realm vice the not surviving realm. And I would argue that at present we are not surviving. And we talk about food costs, but we also forget to talk about oftentimes food quality. And I'm not talking about like, let's go to Erewhon over, let's go to, I don't want to disparage anybody, Walmart. But what we're talking about is actual nutrition and access to nutrition. So what we're watching happen is you have two things taking place. You have the cost of operations for a quality producer, like a family farm or so on, that's going to give you something that's nutrient dense, high quality, no processed foods, no artificial food coloring, nothing like that, just quality food. Their ability to survive and produce quality goods here in California has basically become very difficult. It has become almost, I would say, impossible at this point. And so we now have a crisis of nutrition for our children, not only for ourselves, but you think about what it is that a child 10 years old to 18 years old is eating on a regular basis as their body is developing. And part of our issue is that, I'm 43. So some people say that's old. Some people say it's not old. But what it is it's enough time for me to say, this is what I was eating 20 years ago. Here's what the nutrition was 20 years ago, and here's what it is today. Is that what we eat today? Is that going to help the children of today develop fully and make sure that they have a full opportunity, whether it be physically or mentally? And the answer is no. It's not available anymore. And if it is available, it's far too expensive for the average American to afford that. And so we're running into a scenario where we don't have the ability to afford the nutrition that our children need to grow up and become fully developed and move on to the next phase of life, where they go on, they get a degree, or they go off on their own. So we're seeing this happen, and it is, I think it's inconceivable for a lot of people to acknowledge that their government is not working in their best interests. And I think, particularly as a veteran, that was one of the hardest lessons that I received. And I learned it in a very quick way. I actually learned it in the capital of California. And it became obvious to me that the state of California has no interests in helping small business, and they have no interest in taking care of the next generation. What they have an interest in is receiving as many donations as possible from mega donors to make sure that they and their families eat well. And that's the reality. And I understand that there's cognitive dissonance that is going to play into this, but that's the reality of somebody who has spent a lifetime studying politics and policy and has degrees in this and has stood in the Capitol, has met with the governor, has met with the governor's office, has met with the legislators, have met with the regulators. I have met with all of the different appendages of our government that is relevant for a business owner. And that is my professional analysis, is that they do not want 10,000 businesses. They want 3 large corporations that will do exactly as they tell them to do, and that will give big donations, and that's it. And it doesn't matter what the topic is. And this is really very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, because we all want to believe that our government is operating with our money in our best interests. And what I see regularly is a continual reminder that that's not true. And there's going to be dozens of examples in here, but the big one is, why are we paying more taxes when we get less?
Yeah.
Why is my state government basically using the whole of government to shut down parents who are asking questions about their schools, about their children's educational curriculum? Why are we using whole of government to shut down ranches? Why are we using whole of government to basically force businesses out of the state of California? So there's a lot of these indicators, but it sometimes isn't enough to push somebody all the way to that final conclusion that my government doesn't care about me. And that, I think, is one of the biggest lessons, the biggest takeaways, and the biggest focuses that we need to address as we go into this election, but as we go forward, because we can fix it, and it's only our fault that it's in this situation. And that's kind of the harsh political reality that we've got to recognize.
Yeah. Yep. That's why I'm going to keep saying it. You guys could hate it or love it, but we got to vote. You got to vote. We were like 18 days out. We got to vote because all of these things are weighing on how our life is going to be like in the next couple years, on top of realizing what our kids get to look forward to or live in or have to live through.
Yes.
So I think this is a perfect transition. As I said, you guys, I got super excited that he was going to give me some time today. So I want to keep it short, but I have so many questions to dive into. In like the past couple years, I really just stuck my head deep into this. I've never been a type of person to sit on the couch and watch regular mainstream TV anyways. And so thankful for YouTube and not being too hard on censorship. But let's talk about censorship. When you talk about people not being too aware of these things, censorship is out there, which is part of our First Amendment. And I know a lot of people have gone back and forth about that, but I don't know that everybody is aware of how much that is weighing in on this particular election, because there was a lot of riffraff that has been happening with the past couple of elections that's been a main topic.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. The place to start on that one is Section 230. And so what effectively has happened in my assessment is that our government has decided that corporations have more rights than individuals, which does happen in a democracy, which is why we are not a democracy. We are a republic. And in a republic, the individuals are the only ones that have sovereign rights. And the situation that we now have here in America is basically in a form tech oligarchy that controls information flow. So if you think about anything that we make a decision on, you look at it as an equation. Everything that you do, you factor in goods and bads, and then you come up with your decision. Obviously, if I can adjust what it is that you're putting into your equation, I can then change the outcome. So I don't have to stop you from making a decision. I have to change your decision. And that's what censorship has become. And it has become an art and a science. And so we don't have really that many representatives that are actually trying to protect our free speech. Our current representative here in this district is not in any way, shape, or form. In fact, this person sits right next to Nancy Pelosi, and that is one of the most powerful people in Congress, was, and I would argue still is. And that person is sitting right next to many of the tech people. As you probably are aware, Mark Zuckerberg came out and basically admitted to everything that was being alleged that they were doing in 2020 and so on. The question I have is, how long do we tolerate this? In my opinion, any representative who is not speaking out vehemently against this should be removed from office, because we are not. So the best example I can give is that there's at least three Americas, right? When you look at it from like a censorship lens, if you just call it the algorithms, if you will. You have basically the kind of right-leaning algorithm, the left-leaning algorithm, and the I'm checked out algorithm. Like, I don't want anything to do with politics, and that's over here. And then there's everything that the left sees, and there's everything that the right sees. And what it's doing is it's creating this greater information divide. And it's very, very specifically being used to divide all of us. And I think what's happening is we are getting so deep into our information that we're not picking our head up and looking around to see what's real and what's not real. And it becomes so difficult in what I would consider basically the art of obfuscation. I don't have to remove your access to that other information. I just need to give you more information between you and the truth. And I know that as a percentage basis, most people are not going to go all the way down the rabbit hole. They're not going to find the end and find the kernel of truth. They're going to get distracted by something else along the way. And this is kind of the new form of censorship that's happening. It's not just a block, stop your speech. It's also changing your decision-making equation. And again, going back to the republic, that is repugnant, to use constitutional words. That is repugnant to the Constitution. if anybody is taking away the right of an American to convey their information, their positions, etc., that's a violation of constitutional rights. Now, this is basically taking away our ability for discourse at this point, because when I show up to talk to someone who's a far left voter, all they want to ask me about is the 2020 election in January 6th. And it's like, how's your food?
Yeah.
Can you afford food? Do you know what's going on with your water supply?
Right.
Are you aware of the education that your child is receiving? Do you feel safe? Do you lock your doors? Do you? And what are you willing to give? Because we've got these, it's its own type of censorship. And this is kind of the problem with censorship's term, is it can be very broad. But in short, if we do not have access to truth, then we live in tyranny. And I believe that we do not have access to truth today. And I believe that it is Congress's job, Congress's charge, and the authority is to make sure that Americans can speak. And I don't know. I don't know if we would even be as far along in our conversation as our national discourse if Elon Musk would not have put up $40+ billion to buy one of the three major platforms. And you kind of think about how that one purchase has completely changed the discourse in America for the better by, in essence, undoing a bit of the censorship. And I believe if Americans were serious about undoing censorship, we would stop using most of the platforms that allow censorship to happen. So can we put down, Facebook long enough for them to recognize that we need to be honest and have honest discourse? And it sounds like Mark realized he was on the wrong side of history and needed to come clean and pay his penance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they say that as far as certain corporations pushing particular agendas, stop shopping at those places, and maybe that'll, wake somebody up there or make a difference. And I think that it does take us being involved and aware of these things to do that. I've yet to put Target down, but they've kind of backed up a little bit and made some changes. But yeah, let's tap into a little bit of how much they do push their agenda, whether that's them censoring it in the background. We're having a very hot topic here, so I wouldn't be surprised if StreamYard is looking our shit up. But we'll see. Elon supposedly bought most of YouTube, and that just came out recently.
Wow,
I think there's a lot of fear around somebody that obviously well off to have that much power. I mean, I don't know who's ever going to be watching this. I'm sure you're aware of what he did for North Carolina, turning on the Starlink for people with no power. And he's fully on board. And from what I'm hearing, Trump is definitely going to find a space for him there. What are your thoughts on that, since we were talking about Elon?
Well, I would love to see an Office of Government Efficiency. That is for sure. I think there's a few lifetimes of work for Elon sitting in front of him to create efficiencies in the government. But it kind of begs the question. So in a republic, the main focus is institutions, and there are supposed to be these longstanding institutions that protect this particular right or liberty of a citizen. And now what's happened is we've kind of lost the narrative. At least our government, our federal agencies have basically lost the narrative, and they are operating for their own benefit. They do not provide a great deal of service to their actual constituency. And this is where people like someone like Musk can show up and leverage mass amounts of capital in order to create a more efficient and more desirable outcome than our government. Because not to get real, I guess, reductive on it, but you have this massive agency, whatever you want to call it, that basically can barely operate under its own weight. And if we take that kind of slow, lethargic death of an agency insofar as its performance, its ability to deliver uh, any sort of services or benefits for the citizenry,
Mhm.
eventually you run into it becomes stagnant. And a great example that I love to beat on is the VA. Great concept. Yes, we should absolutely have some agency that or administration that is focused on addressing the veterans in their care. But it's become so large that it is largely ineffective. Now, there are great people that work at the VA. There's a lot of good that happens in the VA, but it's not even close to what it could be or should be. I've recently gone through a lot of the VA systems just to be a part of the process and see it firsthand for myself. And it's terrible. It is absolutely terrible. And I look at that as an example of could we do this better on a private front? Now, I don't think that that's necessarily a service that should be provided by by a private entity as far as giving services to veterans, but we know for a fact that private industry can be far more effective and create better outcomes. And so those are the types of things that I would love to see Elon step in and create a lot more efficiencies, a lot more technological advancements inside of our systems. Again, coming from the military in the background and so on, there are computer programs that are used by our government today that are older than me,
I believe
and
that. Green
that's
screen.
insane. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
real. That's still there. Like, think about it. Do you know any other entity that asks you to fax them information today in 2024? No, only
Yeah.
one.
Right.
But we can't fix that problem. So, these are the little tiny things. But yes, I would say getting somebody like Elon Musk's brain involved in refining our government and our institutions and helping, I think, trim a lot of the fat inside of those organizations, those agencies, I think it is direly needed. And I think it actually changes a bit of the dialogue um,
Yeah.
between the parties, because a lot of times what I hear from Republicans that I think lands as offensive to others is, we don't want social programs and so on. And that's not even remotely close to what I hear Republicans saying. What we want are government programs that work and are effective with our money.
Yeah.
That I think is what everybody's looking for. Nobody has a problem with, no one should have a problem with immigration. What we have a problem with is a broken immigration system. We can see that it's not working. So there's no shortage of examples where somebody like Elon could come in and turn this government around and I think accomplish what both parties are looking for. We still want these services, but we want these services at a good price. That's the difference, because every year the cost to the American citizens goes up. But I don't believe anybody would agree that every year the quality of our services goes up either. So
Yeah.
I would argue that there's a way for us to accomplish what the left is looking for and what the right is looking for through somebody like Musk addressing so many of the inefficiencies and technological, what's the word I'm looking for? Antiquation.
I'm with it. I'm with the dark MAGA all the way.
MAGA.
I was like, okay, we'll work with that. But
Yeah.
no, I thought it was interesting. And, I've heard from other podcasters that cover all these type of stories and policies. There's a lot of older people that are very set in their ways that are sitting in there. And like you said, somebody like Elon Musk is a good fresh pair of eyes, a good fresh of everything that's going on in that brain of his.
Oh, yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the taxes. The economy is so bad that there's so much homelessness happening, yet we hear that our government has enough money to take care of other countries and also take care of people at the border for certain transition agendas that they feel they should cater to. And I think that is one of the biggest policies and the reason I will be voting Republican this year, conservative, however you guys want to say it. I will be voting for Trump. But I find that absolutely ridiculous. And both my parents are from Philippines and from El Salvador. They came here at 17 legally and went through the system, paid a lot of money, and took a lot of time out of their days to go to these, meetings to get the proper documentation to be here. Where my mom comes from El Salvador, and right now it's the best it's ever been. But to my understanding, they lived in a very, military was around everywhere, even when my parents visited as, for one of their honeymoons. And it was because the people just gave up and just decided, my vote means nothing. It doesn't matter. And so they took over, and now they have a president that has really cleaned things up, tightened it up, and a lot of people say it's better than America now. And that's really, really interesting to hear.
It's mind blowing. And I know people that have spent and have a lot of history in El Salvador and have paid attention to it very closely. And they tell me that their opinion is that they would rather live in El Salvador than America. And these are veterans. These are people that, have done their duty to the country. But I think Bukele has done a phenomenal job turning around what was really a lost country for a time. Particularly in the 70s, it was a war zone. And, to see what can happen with the right leadership and, when the people's voice is heard, I think El Salvador is a great example of what can be done in a republic. And my hope is that we have that same type of courage as a voter base here in America to do that, because our economy is not doing well. Our economy is it's being artificially stimulated for the better part of a decade. I think to put a little bit more context on it, we've got, call it 2008, everybody kind of had a falling apart process. The economy fell apart pretty significantly. And by about 2012, we kind of got back on track a bit. We were pointed back in the same direction again. But if you think about the trillions of dollars that were spent through quantitative easing and TARP and all these other government subsidized programs to try and keep private banking alive in 2008, the real impact of that on the average American was, I've got to now work 2 jobs or 3 jobs to figure out how to keep up and how to afford what I've got. And I think what happened is from 2012 to maybe 2018, 19, 20-ish, everybody went redline and was going as hard as they possibly could to try and get back into that financial standing. But what had happened from 2008 onward is that the government had doled out so much money. Then on top of that, you have the COVID situation where we printed another $6 trillion in a matter of years. We basically just inundated our money supply in a way that made it so that most of us can't afford anything. And I would argue that there's a lot of people who think that they're middle class that are no longer middle class because of that type of inflation. I was just doing the numbers today with somebody, and we went through and figured out how much a dishwasher was in 1975 vice today. And the way that I was talking to somebody who's a plumber, and they said, if you wanted a dishwasher today that had the same level of quality that you could have bought a dishwasher in 1960s and 70s, you're looking at a $4,000 dishwasher today. Mm-hmm. And so I went back and ran the numbers and said, okay, well, how much was a dishwasher in 1975? And, what's the cost difference? What's the inflation rate? And it turns out that there's a 16x increase in costs between 1975 and today. So if you were to take that same rate of inflation, a $300 dishwasher in 1975 would cost you roughly $4,800 today. And these are some of the basic examples that we skip by and we don't even think about. And so we're looking at a scenario where instead of our leaders solving our problems, they've printed more money for us to feel like there's more money available. But what happens is that all that money that gets printed eventually ends up in the institutional groups. So your BlackRocks, whoever your institutional finance group. And that money is now no longer in the money supply available to the rest of us. So our economy is basically working off of less and less money available to the average American, but more money in the overall system. What that does is it makes it more difficult for us, the average American, to compete. And this is why we're running into a scenario where so many of us can make six figures and still live paycheck to paycheck. I think the last number that I saw, I posted it yesterday, but if you're a family of four, two adults, two children in America, I think you have to make $205,000 a year to live comfortably.
Oh, I believe it. I
200
believe that.
Over $200,000 to cover four people.
Is that just California?
I think that was average American. I
Oh,
think.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a look at my Instagram and confirm it. But yeah, and these are all kind of the outcomes of failed economic plans. So our country is missing vision. What is the overall goal of our economy? What are we trying to accomplish? One of the great things that I felt that JFK did for America was that he gave it vision. He said, we're going to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. We're going to do that because this is what we're supposed to do as America, not as Americans, as America. We are the vision. We are supposed to be the place where this all works, and that we aspire to higher outcomes. And so instead, what's happening is that we have a lot of people in government who are doing whatever they can to basically make it so that the problem does not come back within their term. That's why we printed trillions and trillions of dollars. We put all this money into improving our infrastructure. Where is it? Can we see it? I don't see it.
Yeah.
I see the opposite. But our economy, I think, the main point of your question is, we do not have people in charge that have business experience. There's a lot of lawyers, but as we all know, they're not business owners. And if they were business owners, they wouldn't have created their own corporation structure with an LLP. So we need people who have business experience to sit in the positions that are going to make the decisions that will build our economy again. Because if we don't understand the basics of our system, then we're going to be in bigger problems than we have today. And to answer the first part of your question, when we pay our taxes, it doesn't cover anything. No one's taxes goes into the budget.
Okay. Where does our money go?
What's that?
Where does our money go?
It pays the interest on the debt. So federal income tax, I think for the most recent numbers, is $2.4 trillion. We are paying $1 trillion a year just in debt servicing. So what happens, and the reason why I went kind of on that long explanation of how we've continued to print more and more money, is when you print money, you create debt. You have to have another entity that buys the money, if you will. And then we have to pay interest on that over time. And so when we, the American taxpayers, pay our taxes every year, it doesn't touch the budget at all. It pays for nothing. Everything that we are paying for is coming out of debt.
Wow.
More debt. So your children's children will pay the debt that your government today is pulling out.
Very interesting.
Yes. And this is the reality that we got to understand. Our government does not work like a business.
Yeah.
It can just print and print. So we have people going homeless because they can't afford to pay the taxes, which don't actually pay for any of the goods, because our government keeps going into greater debt. Now, eventually what happens is that we create an opportunity for China or economic warfare to happen, because our dollar is so weakened that they can, they could, if they wanted to, there's one of two plays that I can see China doing. It is either that they do a quarantine of Taiwan, which will then really cause a lot of our supply chains to cease, because Taiwan is the epicenter of all of the processing chips for the whole world. So if they do that, much of the like advanced manufacturing capabilities of the world will stop, or China could sell off all of their treasury notes and flood the money markets with our dollars. And now our money is worth even less. And then what do we do? So it comes down to us understanding how our government works and how we fit into that government system. Otherwise, we are kind of sitting out here playing the I believe scenario with our, the people that we're supposed to trust, who are just continuing to hurt us more and more economically.
Yeah, I mean, that is so well broken down. Thank you for
Sure.
breaking that down for people like me. Yeah, no, if you guys see anything that Chris is talking about and you have questions, please drop it in the comments and we'll make sure we get you guys the answer. We're getting close to the hour. I still have so many to go through, but I think lastly, because you guys, specifically you guys on your website are really focusing on economy, education, and environment. I think we touched a little bit on environment and economy. How about education? As a mom, like I said, my kid does not go to school, but I do see a lot of parents who are having to go to school meetings, who are being either told they can't speak their mind. Me personally, what I see happening in certain particular schools, I don't know if all districts are the same, but they definitely have an agenda. And the more patriotic your child is, that child there's children that have been expelled for particular speeches that were patriotic. My half brother was taken to the principal's office for wearing a patriotic shirt, nothing to do with Trump, but a patriotic shirt. And I believe also a flag pin on a backpack. To me, I find that ridiculous. They're children that are proud to be Americans and patriots. They're not telling them they can't do what they are doing and trying to teach our children to be okay with or normalize, I would say. But if our children go to school that way, they get seen as a threat or they're the problem. And I just think that's really, I mean, my kids won't be going to school anytime soon. Let's just put it that way. That's how much I've lost faith in even trying to figure out the best school, because it seems like the funding's behind something is happening to, I don't know the details of it, but please enlighten me as to what's happening with our educational system.
Well, the short of it is that they're trying to own your children. If they can't own your children, they will own your children's mind. And that is the reality.
Yeah, AB 1955, I think, is out there. And I just watch, the left and the right go back and forth as to what they believe in. And I'm just baffled as to some of the educators that lean left honestly think that they have a stronger and better relationship with our children than we do, whether or not we've been taking care of our children since they were born, and that they have every right to give that child a safe place. And that's what they think is safe.
Yes.
Yeah, no way I'm no way am I going to be voting for anything that comes out of the left at this point in time. So
yeah,
that's the most scary part, is the agenda that they're pushing on our children.
And I'd say it's a very dangerous agenda as well. I will commend the parents for the level of patience that they have expressed, because what's happening, and I don't know that, most of your teachers are probably in their 20s and 30s, and I don't think that they really understand how they fit into a bigger picture. But what they are trying to do is effectively create a scenario where your children, anybody's child that's in the educational system, learns to be more reliant on government. And I'm using the word government in lieu of the school, in lieu of whatever authority entity it is that your children are going to operate under for the rest of their lives, because their world is not our world. The world that we grew up in does not exist anymore. Their world is a very different, far more contrived, far more designed space than anything we could have comprehended at the time. the outcome that I see happening is one of two. Parents are either going to stand up and fight, and they are going to push back with everything. Like, there's the mom army. There's mom army, dad army. That's an amazing group of people that are doing exactly this. They are standing up, they are fighting, and they are helping parents organize. And I would encourage anybody that's kind of on the same page that you and I are on to look at mom army, dad army. I'm thinking about starting an uncle army because that's a thing. So yeah. But the problem that we run into is that this is kind of this long-term inculcation process that takes place. And what will happen is if a parent doesn't have the ability to pull their child out of education, which, I mean, you've got to really stop and pause for a second and think about what you just said. You're talking about pulling your child out of school that is in a system in the 5th largest economy in the world. And you are going to pull them out of that and say, I can do better. And the reality is, you're correct. You can do better because, one, you care, and you're not paid to care. You pay to care. But this whole, and it's hard to talk about these things because there's so many people that will just cast it aside as nonsense. But when you watch what the parents are doing on a daily basis just to make it so that their children have access to a decent education, not a good education, a decent education. Because I think California ranks, what are we, 43rd or 48th? Why? Why would we, we were the pinnacle of education, whether it be public education, private education, for the longest time, for decades, we were the pinnacle. And now we're talking about basically an inversion where the people who care the most and, we're trying to find the right schools to send their children to are now saying, I'm done. And this is not acceptable at all. And I am going to, while still paying my taxes, still paying my property taxes, which then cover my school costs, some of it, even though, my sister is,
those go up too every year.
and every time I turn around, there's another fundraiser for an elementary school. Why is my 6th grade nephew raising funds for his school? Why?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're right.
That's because these property prices are not small, right? This is not, I think the median home in Sonoma County is $600,000, $700,000. So it's not a funding issue. It's a leadership issue. And I do believe that the parents need to get involved because as much power as somebody in Congress has, they don't have the same power as a bunch of organized parents in their school district.
Wow.
That's the reality. But it comes down to us getting involved. It comes down to the parents stepping up and fighting, because if we do not do this, the next generation is lost. And everybody always says this election is the most important election. And I never used to really agree with that. But the reality is that each election is the most important one because it's the one here now making the decisions for the future.
Right.
This decision, this November, is going to be arguably the most existential decision that we're going to make as a country, as a state, as a region, about who's going to be in charge and what path are we going to go down. Because right now, we not only have royally destroyed our environment, we have destroyed our economy, and our educational system is, I would argue, in the dumps.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how much longer? How much longer do we put up with this as parents, as uncles, as aunts, as family? How much longer do we pay into a system? Do we support a system that is not supporting us? And anywhere, you can look at a lot of different metrics to figure out where we are, but I feel education is one of those that's pretty objective. You are either giving your students high quality education or you are not. And if we're ranked in the 40s We are not. But they are the education of the current, of the youth. We set them up to be the leaders of tomorrow. And we've always heard these phrases, and they're all kind of become cliche. But everything that we are arming them with today is what they will have to fight with tomorrow. And I am fighting to make sure that they have everything available to them. Otherwise, everybody is going to suffer more than we can even see today. And so that's why I harp on education as much as I do, because if we are not engaging our youth to address the challenges of tomorrow, then we are setting them up to fail. And I can't accept it. And I can't let that just happen. And that's why I'm fighting, because if they can't afford the basics, if they're not getting quality nutrition, if they're not getting a quality education, what are we setting them up to be when they're 30? And I think when we get into many of these other topics that the youth are dealing with and the kids are dealing with, I believe that they're going to wake up and they're going to ask, how did you let this happen? They're going to ask us, me, you, anybody, in like their 30s and up, how did we get here? And I think there's going to be some of us who said, I fought, and there are others that won't have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I will not be the silent on the sidelines.
It's a little bit easier. And so when people say, I'm not into it, I'm not into politics, I'm not asking for anybody to be into the politics, but at the end of the day, it affects us all the way around, from how we live to how our children will live. I just think that we need to be more aware of what's happening in our community and then all around us, because it's kind of a trickle effect. But we appreciate you coming on, and you're running for U.S. Senate.
Congress. Yep.
Congress.
U.S. Congress. So the House of Representatives, 2nd Congressional District, which is the North Coast, Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border.
Okay, you heard that, guys. We have many people that have watched my podcast that are from there, whether you vote or not. You heard it from himself. There's a lot of things that are weighing on us, not just the farmers, just families in general, and even small business owners. We want California to thrive. To my understanding, I don't know, over 100,000 or so many people have left California alone, which made me nervous. Yeah, they've just fuck this place. The biggest companies like Elon Musk took away Tesla. There's a lot of things that I think California alone can work on. As far as United States, that's, everybody effort as a whole. But here in California and those watching, we need you guys to vote. And I'm going to end it there. I do have a rapid fire. I don't know if you have time. Okay, cool. But before we do that, any last words from you to the people?
Well, I think you covered it well. Get out and vote. To kind of summarize somebody else's quote from 2,000 years ago, it was just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean that politics doesn't take an interest in you. And so you've got to be involved. You've got to pay attention to it. The other quote, I think it was Mark Twain, somebody along those lines, basically said, if you don't vote, then you subject yourself to being ruled by your inferiors. And I would argue that if there's ever a case in point, here we are. And so no matter what, read, understand your system of government, understand that most of these people are trying to lie to you. And right now, your government is lying to you. It is up to you to find the truth, and it is up to you to act on that, because only we can bring about truth. If we do not get engaged, then they run the narrative. If they run the narrative, they will run a narrative that benefits them, not us. And we can see this at our national scales, our state scale, local scale. To touch on your point, we watched a lot of people vote with their feet. And these are, I think, there's some important points to make. You vote with your vote at the ballot. You also vote with your dollar. And you touched on that earlier. We've got to learn that we can stop spending money at not Target, but Walmart. You can spend your money with those that align with your values and your principles. Then lastly, it's where you live, what you do. So a lot of people are leaving the state of California because they see that it's no longer viable, and that is a form of voting. If you pick up and move, you're leaving somewhere because it's not desirable, and you're going somewhere that you believe is more desirable. Obviously, I got to be careful with what I say, but this is California and it's beautiful. People don't leave California generally because they want to. They leave because they have to, or they have a better option somewhere else. But it's generally not the weather that they're going to. So get involved, because this is our future. And if we do not get involved in our future, someone else will write it for us. And as of today, our future is not written. It is up to us to write it. And I'm here and I'm asking for you to help write it with me. Because if we don't, we'll not have another chance.
Yep. We will not be a country that exists anymore.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, I appreciate everything that you've shared with us and educated me on. I can't wait to just grow in community with you and just learn from someone like you. A lot of people call you a leader in our space, and I know that you're the leader that we need in Congress. So I'm hoping that everybody gets out there and votes. But before I let you go, this is a fun 7 grams. So it's completely light and no politics involved. So enjoy, you guys, the last 2 minutes of this. All right, rapid fire, 1 word, 1 question, or 1 word, 1 answer. What's your favorite way to consume cannabis? And you can say, I don't consume it. That applies.
I do consume. It's a joint.
Perfect. Have you ever grown your own cannabis?
Yes.
Are you a fan of dispensaries, or are you more of a fan of a plug?
I don't think I can answer that.
Pass for Chris. Okay, what's your favorite cannabis publication?
Beer Bros.
Ooh, good one. Okay, and let's see. What's 1 annual cannabis event that you look forward to each year, and why?
Emerald Cup, because that was the longstanding opportunity for farmers to get out and connect with them. And we were also the first presenting sponsor of the first licensed Emerald Cup in 2018. And it's got a special place in my heart because I know the history and the legacy of that outlet. So I'm grateful to support them and grateful for the support that they have for the community.
Yes. Shout out to Tim and Taylor and the entire Emerald Cup team. I think that's when I first became a judge, 2018, and I've been.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, pre-roll judge actually. So that you like pre-rolls, we got to get you.
Yeah.
That'd be great. The debates would be very, very intense. I could imagine. Okay, last one. What's your favorite stoner or mobster movie?
Oh man. Stoner or mobster movie?
I felt like changing it for you this one time. Like, who's your favorite, president? But we'll keep it to myself.
That's a tough one. I think How High is the one that comes to mind first.
How High?
Yeah, way back. Got Fire.
Yeah, with Redman and Method Man. Yeah, that's classic.
Got Tree, Got Fire.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. All right. Well, thank you so much again for spending your afternoon with me. I know you've got places to be, people to see. All your information will be in our description. And that's pretty much it for today. I hope you have a good one.
Great. Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.